Welcome to Heart Power with Saskia, the heart-based podcast exploring what it means to be intuitive, follow one's heart, and be truly empowered from the inside out. Welcome to the show, everyone. I was very excited to be joined in this episode by Tanishka. She is best known for her work as the Moon Woman on Facebook. She's an incredible speaker and wisdom keeper, and I reached out to her to look at rites of passage because my son is at the age of 12 where I feel like he could really benefit from ceremony and ritual in helping him move into the next phase of his life. So I really wanted to explore that and get curious with her. Tanishka imparted a lot of incredible knowledge and wisdom. So I hope you enjoy this as much as I did, and here she is.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for coming on. It's really, I kept getting the nudge and it just, they wouldn't shut up, when you keep getting that message. And I'm like, all right. I'll
Thank
message
you.
her.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to have you on. There's so many things that I've heard you speak about over the years where I'm always getting a lot of sparks and very inspired. Like I feel like I've been in conversation with you already a lot in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my main reasoning for having you on the show is to talk about rites of passage and talk about the archetypal energies and the cycles that we go through in our lives. And it feels quite poignant at this solstice point, which is a big point in the natural cycle of going from one to the next. I guess nature's always going through these cycles, as are we, where we're all one and the same. I and my son, who's just recently turned 12 in April, is at that pivotal point of change. The hormones are pulsing through. And I drove to the beach before and he wanted to stay home, and then he ran to the door and said, "Mum, wait, I want to come." And I was like, oh, he still wants to come with me at this stage. Hopefully, I can maintain my connection with him and be his friend, and, as he traverses through this phase of his life. I'm really curious to investigate how I can support him best through this transition, and having that right support there is so important. I've journeyed a little bit with the feminine. Like, I know that there's the maiden, the mother, and the crone, and probably the child before the maiden. But with males, is it the boy, the father, and then the wizard, or what are the archetypal energies of men?
So, traditionally for women it was maiden, mother, crone, and you're right, child before those 4 adult life stages start. But like many others, I also recognise the stage of the mage, which is midlife, the stage that I'm in, which is akin to autumn. So maiden is like spring, mother is like summer, the mage is autumn, and then the crone or the elder woman is winter. The male equivalents, as I see them, are the knight, who is evoked in springtime, the king, who is evoked in summer, the magi, who is evoked in the autumnal phase of midlife, and then the sage, who's evoked in the winter of our lives, in our elder years for men. So my last book, I actually unpack each of those 4 life stages for men and speak about what their lesson is during both the life stage and the transition, so that, we can move forwards with confidence and embrace the next stage rather than what we've been programmed to do, which is to resist the natural evolutionary process of aging, fearing it as, death is coming closer, and because of that, the collective psyche has not matured, and it's that lack of maturity that is putting life on the brink. We need wisdom to turn the ship around, so to speak.
Absolutely. And there's this youth-obsessed culture that we find ourselves with, isn't it, where people are just resisting moving to that next phase. It's all about naivety. People are sort of staying stuck in their childhood trauma, in a sense, and not being able to free themselves from that. And do you think part of that is what anchors them as well?
Yeah. So if we don't receive support and mentoring to make the shift from one life stage to the next, it stunts our growth, so we can't move forwards. And, we see that with, I often used to refer clients that were struggling with adult children living at home, not stepping up and fulfilling their responsibilities, to the film Step Brothers with Will Ferrell, because it's such a great parody of, adult that are behaving like children because they haven't received a welcome to manhood or a welcome to womanhood, which is what catalyzes the shift in the psyche. So if our kids aren't given that, and it needs to be done by someone other than the parents. And the reason is, when we reach puberty, we naturally start the process of individuation from our parent. It's more pronounced from a son individuating from his dad, or a daughter individuating from her mum. And that's because we're trying to assert our own individuality and say, this is who I am. And we start by saying, well, I'm not like you. So we start rejecting the same-sex parent, tearing them down off the pedestal that we put them on. Because, when our children are young, they want to be just like us. I know my daughter faked an eye test so she could get glasses to look like mum.
No way.
Yeah. But
That's
what
cute.
goes up must come down. If someone puts you on a pedestal, of course, to take back their personal power, they're going to vilify you, So
absolutely.
This is why, in traditional cultures, regardless of where our ancestors hail from, we all had rites of passage. And the reason that we don't, and that we haven't for the last 2,000 years, is, they were outlawed by the Roman Empire.
Really?
On the understanding that if a collective consciousness is mature, they're not just going to be easily manipulated and dominated by an external authority, because they'll have their own internal authority, their own locus of reality. So, this was an act of war to deny us of our God-given birthright, which is our sacred rights. And I do believe that our human rights and the reclamation of our sacred rights go hand in hand, that when we reclaim the lost cultural traditions of our ancestors, particularly those of us that are from the Western world that were colonized by Rome, or outposts of what was the Roman Empire, then with a strong cultural identity, we can move forward as a species, and not be, projecting parent onto the government or onto the system or onto, the dynastic families, the globalists, that.
Yeah, well, I know that there's a lot of different cultures. Like some cultures, they actually steal the child from the mother, and the mother puts on a whole like, no, don't take my child, and this whole sort of acts out this big drama as they come and take the child away, and they go then on some sort of pilgrimage for a number of days into the wild, and there's this whole transformative process that goes through that. Do you think going into nature with other people, or what do you feel is an appropriate way to transition from one phase to another?
Well, I'm sitting here with a goofy grin on my face because hearing you recount that, I'm like, oh, geez, I can just see our modern world turning that into a reality TV show. Having
Probably.
kids, you know what I mean, traumatized in public. So my understanding of, what the welcome to manhood ceremony consisted of, which is different to the welcome to womanhood. It was taking the boys, as you said, into nature, but for a night on their own, because the evening is the time of the feminine. And so for them to individuate from their mother, to not be tied to their mother's apron strings, to not be a mummy's boy, they need to individuate from their mum. And so the separation from the mother was the boys would go away with the men. Each boy, you know, had his own fire that he needed to build and tend, which is symbolic of tending to the light within, so that you can spend a night under the stars in the dark, facing your fear of the unknown, because the feminine principle is the unknown. It's chaos, it's change, it's death. So by a boy spending a night, and, you know, they would prepare him, you know, by explaining that the stars are his ancestors watching over him. And, you know, ceremony is what we have always used in a therapeutic capacity during times of crisis and change. So it empowers us to have ceremony. You know, ritual is any physical act that anchors a change in our somatic body that we know we need to change on a cerebral level. And it helps us, you know, to go, all right, through doing this symbolically, I'm going to be able to take the step forward in my life. And that's why, you know, people blow out candles, or, you know, jump the broom for a wedding. You know, there's some physical act that helps them to make the commitment to move forwards. So boys have support, but they're facing their fear of being alone, of not being able to run to their mother. So, yeah, when men don't receive that, what happens in relationships with women is men have this inner conflict where they don't want to admit how needy they are of perhaps their female partner, or if they're gay, a more feminine dominant partner. And, you know, so then they'll push back to not feel so needy. And that might be by having an affair. You know, you don't have any power over me, you know, and try to prove to themselves, I don't need my mother surrogate, you know. So there's lots of social ramifications of us not having rites of passage. I mean, the Africans have a proverb, we initiate the boys so they don't burn down the village. I'm paraphrasing. But, you know, the Australian Indigenous boys would chew up ochre and spit onto their hands inside a wall of a cave, leaving a handprint. And this says, I exist. Yeah, I exist in my own right. And this was part of their rite of passage into manhood. And without that, we have our boys with spray cans tagging trains saying, I exist. You know, they're unconsciously trying to assert, hey, I exist. And when they do, they're punished, you know, because it's such a primal need to have some sort of marking of this threshold crossing, that if we don't provide it as elders in the community for our young, they're going to seek it out in destructive ways, such as I'm going to steal something to prove that I'm not afraid, or I'm going to engage in risky behavior. I'm going to jump, you know, just before the train comes, you know what I mean, to prove their manhood to their peers. Or they might pass a bong around a lounge room rather than a talking stick, because they're seeking some sort of ritual inclusion, being part of a group where there is an element of it being out of the everyday world. And that's why kids, you know, seek out altered states through drugs. They're seeking ceremony, you know, or they're covering themselves in tattoos or piercings. They're seeking initiation. because we're not giving it to them, because we didn't give it, and we didn't get it, so we're like, how do we pass it on? For girls, it's
Yes.
different. For girls,
Mhm.
it's being welcomed into the Moon Lodge, into the red tent during their most vulnerable time of the month, which is dark moon. Now, fortunately, the wisdom of our bodies means most girls don't start their first menstruation with the darkest phase of the moon. They usually start around full moon, so their psychological, emotional descent isn't as deep. But
Mhm.
yeah, for girls, it's an acknowledgement that they are held by a circle of women of all different ages, different perspectives, so that when they're pushing back from their mum and going, oh, mum, you so don't know where it's at, like you're so embarrassing, yada, 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 they can go to this kind of brain trust of other women and go, oh, this woman seems to know about fashion, or this woman I could speak to about a sexually transmitted disease, or this woman I could speak to about, an entrepreneurial idea I had, on the understanding that one woman can't, be everything. So that the role of the Earth Mother, it kind of, it's not that it completely stops, because once we're a parent, you're always a parent. But it's a time when the role of the spiritual mother, which is the godmother, takes over. So this is when, archetypally, girls are, they're seeking to know the bigger questions in life. Who am I? Why am I here? And so the Moon Lodge is kind of like giving them a Harry Potter school once a month, where they're learning about the mystic part of being a woman, which is that our sensitivity is a strength. It's a superhero talent. It's not something to feel ashamed of, but we've got to caretake our sensitivity by, when we are at our lowest ebb each month, by nurturing ourselves, by not putting ourselves around people that are abrasive, or in environments like shopping centers and things that are overwhelming for our senses and subtle senses. But in caretaking our sensitivity, then it becomes a gift. We can learn how to use our inner sight, our inner hearing, our inner knowing, our inner sensing, with the guidance of women that validate. Tell me about your dream. What do you think those symbols mean? Or using art in a therapeutic sense, and looking into the art that you've drawn as if it were a dreamscape, so that it's encouraging girls to have a conversation with their soul. The word psyche means soul. Once a month, when their body takes them down, because 80% of our body's energy reserves goes into menstruation. It's the monthly detox. So acknowledging you're likely to be taken into your darker feelings and mental states once a month, we're going to give you the support to navigate that terrain, so we don't end up with girls, cutting, starving themselves, acting out as mean girls and bullying girls in school and things, because they've got no support to deal with that descent through the shadowlands once a month.
Yeah, no, it's all ringing very true. And I mean, my mum always says about boys that there's the umbilical cord actually has to be cut, by the mother, or probably through this sort of ceremony that you're speaking of. And I can sort of see that there may be a fair amount of the misogyny and things that are sort of existing in our patriarchal culture probably stem from that, in a sense, as well, where there's this sort of resentment for not having been initiated.
Oh,
Yeah,
100%.
so
Hey, your mum is a wise woman, and I completely agree with you. That's something that, really fires me up, acknowledging that we're all trying to heal internalized misogyny, all of us that have grown up in this last 2,000 year cycle, because if you take away the wisdom, teachings, and traditions of the mystic feminine, then the feminine is not understood. The feminine principle, the feminine qualities, the feminine traits. And so they are devalued. So there's no point in us having a conversation about equal pay or, lowering sexual assaults or domestic battery towards women. These are all secondary symptoms. We've got to go to the cause, which is internalized misogyny. And how do we heal that? By educating, by reinstating the lost wisdom traditions of the feminine, because you cannot embrace something if you don't understand it. So people can't embrace the feminine half of themselves, and the soul is both feminine and masculine in all of us.
Yes.
So all of our youth at the moment that are like, hey, I'm gender fluid. Yeah, well, the soul is gender fluid. Yeah, but we need to embrace the gender that our soul in its wisdom chose to embody, because that is the gender that needs healing. So, you know what I mean? When the ego is driving the bus saying, this isn't right, I'm going to fix it myself, then we end up with distortions. We end up with, tragic mutilations, which are a crime on the body. The body is a temple. And our youth, because they're not getting rites of passage, we have twice as many girls rejecting their female identity than we do boys. Now, that in itself is a very telling flag. Our girls are suffering from the internalized misogyny. And there's, it's become such a charged landscape that people who question it are labelled as, phobic and bigots and, name calling. But for a collective psyche to be healthy, it needs to be safe for us to question what is happening. And our young are flagging a huge alarm. They're saying, we don't want to grow up. Anorexia is another, hey, I don't want to grow up. I want to stay like a little girl. Becoming an adult is terrifying, especially when you think about how predatory our culture is, and that most girls, the stats show us the way they're losing their virginity now is through sexual assault. Usually by somebody they know, but it's because the biggest users of porn are 12-year-old boys, because, again, they're not getting told how to court a woman, how to make love to a woman from men, because men are not feeling confident to be able to share that. And, in ancient cultures, again, the priestesses would have a role in that. You can't just expect boys to know how to make love to a woman or to treat a woman if they're not taught. We can't blame them. So it's crisis time, and we need to act.
Yes. And it all sort of cycles back to those earlier initiations from, it's like a full cycle, because the men are then stuck in this they're stuck in the lower chakras, they're stuck in that they're not able to transcend and connect to the feminine, I suppose, because everything has been sort of distorted through this patriarchal world that we're in. I mean, even just being a lot of women feel guilty just for being, they feel that their value needs to be derived through taking action and who they are and, what they can do and all this sort of thing, rather than just who they are inside, and and that they're this amazing, unique soul, just as they are.
That's beautifully put. Speaking to young women who I cross paths with as I travel around the world, and regardless of what country or what culture I'm in, I find that young women apologize unnecessarily for themselves often. And that speaks to what it is that you just raised, this lack of intrinsic worth. And
Mhm.
that also leads women to then, become overachievers, to burn out through overdoing, whether it's, trying to be everything to everybody, never saying no, being the perfect
Mhm.
mother, lover, friend, daughter, employee, trying to be perfect in order to gain love and acceptance and approval, rather than knowing their intrinsic worth, which is something that is received when you're welcome to your womanhood. And it's never too late to receive that. The oldest woman that I initiated was in her 80s, and it made a profound shift in her psyche. So, we can do it retrospectively for those that are listening to this going, oh, missed that boat. Well, no, there's so many women now that have trained and done, red tent facilitation training that can welcome women of all ages to their first red tent. And it makes a profound difference, to actually
Mm. Mm.
have your womanhood valued, and that translates into us making choices that are more self-honoring rather than negating, putting ourselves last, the burnt chop syndrome, giving others the best and giving ourselves the crumbs.
Mm. Yeah, I suppose it's that I just feel like collectively, with all these high frequencies, particularly coming in this year, there's a lot of egoic death going on, like evolution is happening. I think people are just naturally, their stuff's all being pushed up through these cycles that we're in, and I feel like people are recognizing their need to go within more than ever, because everything outside is in chaos. All of the structures are falling and failing, and nothing's making sense. So there's only one place to go, really, that's left, which is home. This is where we find all the truth, in our hearts.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it feels like it's a very poignant time, and ceremonies and rituals and things are, I think, more important than ever now for assisting people so that they can really have that foundation to move through
I
life
agree.
feeling supported.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we think about the high levels of addiction that we see and family breakdown and suicide, all of that is saying people aren't getting the support they need psychologically and emotionally. And, before the rise of the empires, that was the role of the women, to create social structures that supported people, just like a tomato needs a trellis so that if the strong winds come, it's not, destroyed. Well, we need a trellis, and the practice of sharing circles, that afford everybody the equal right to speak and therefore be witnessed in our truth, our deepest, innermost truth, then we feel truly seen and truly heard. And that validation is what heals trauma. So trauma is created through the soul being invalidated. So the more we have reinstated the ongoing practice of circle once a month, and for women to have it align with the darkest phase of the moon when we're most at risk of darker psychological and emotional states. For men, it's ideal to have it when the sun moves into a new sign. So I have on my website facilitator trainings for the 12 suns and the 13 moons practice, which is known as the red tent. So, I'm very keen to let people know that's there as a framework to seed conscious community, because, we need each other. That's we are vulnerable, and we need connection. Connection is what enables us to weather crisis. And we are at a time of crisis. We are going through a huge cosmic cyclic change, a shift of the ages from the Piscean age, that 2,000-year age where we're exploring the duality of everything, like the two fishes, to now the Aquarian age where it's like, okay, this is a time of us shifting into oneness. So traditionally the role of the mystics, and this was a function done by, the witches, meaning wit woman, a woman with her wits about her, the woman you'd go and see in the dark forest, and you'd have to face your fear of the forest to go and see her, like in the story of Baba Yaga, the young girl who has to go and meet with the grandmother to find her inner fire. And, because mystic women were persecuted for 500 years by the Roman cult that was, the birth of Christianity, the Roman Catholic Church, while people might not identify as religious or, it still had such an impact on the group mind that the legacy of that is people don't listen to older women. It's like, what would she know? It's just like mum or nana. So there's a prejudice. And we've been conditioned to mistrust older women. We have them mocked as hags in fairy tales, or evil stepmothers if they're mystic.
Yes, the witches, the
role
bad
of the
witches, isn't it?
Totally. This show that I'm doing in Edinburgh, I've been doing submissions for awards, and in it I'm saying, it's time for the untold heroine story to be told. And in doing that, reclaim the lost mystic traditions, because fairy tales, these were the teaching parables of the wise women. Our fateful tale, sharing our story, illustrates the turning points in our life and the big choices and the impact of our choices, the karma that we reaped. So stories, medicine parables are very important. And it's not enough just to give a bedtime story. We have to give the time and the space to deconstruct the story, to discuss the story. What do you think it meant? And this is something, again, getting back to our youth, that, just to get them off their screens maybe one night a week and have story time, where you find an archetypal folk story and you read it and then discuss it, each person at a time. What did it mean to you? Because every perspective is valid. So, that fairy tales are seen as something for children. I mean, everything is diminished if it is the feminine. And so, the last 4 years I was called to work with men. And the biggest challenge was, because they hadn't done that rite of passage, they're busy running from a woman as mother. Oh, I don't need you. I'm a big boy. I can do this for myself. I'm going to go do ayahuasca and I'm going to get really buff and tattoos. And they're stuck in the warrior phase, which is the night phase. And they can't make that transition into king without the mystic wisdom of the feminine, which is why the Magdalens used to initiate men, not just through these 4 life stages, but annually during the darkest day of winter, the most feminine time on the seasonal wheel, which is the solstice. And, the synchronicity of us having this conversation literally, on the solstice full moon. This is a time when, men are most at risk of depression, illness, injury, and suicide. So the reason that women would facilitate men through their annual ego death and rebirth was we get put through it 13 times a year with our menses. Yeah, that's our death phase. As we shed the uterine lining, we are going through a skin shedding like a serpent, which is why serpents were sacred to the feminine mysteries and demonized by the monotheistic patriarchal religions.
Incredible. So, yeah, it's very aligned. And yeah, there's obviously the two snakes of the masculine and the feminine, and the Sushumna Nadi being the soul in the middle. So, you know, we are in a duality, and it feels very much a time of where we're bringing that masculine and feminine into balance. They're both have been distorted and, you know, come out of balance and out of alignment. And I feel like they're both coming to a place of wanting to be harmonized now. So people are really moving into doing more yoga and breath work, and all of these things are becoming a lot more prevalent. And really, you know, there are a lot more tools to help people access themselves. So although it seems to be getting darker out there, and, you know, it's not something that I like. It's good to be aware, but I think focusing too much on that as well can just exacerbate it in a way. You know, we are creating a new world, and it's not made of the old one. We can't bring that with us. I think it just sort of needs to fall away so we can, you know, rise up and create this new phase that we're stepping into. So it's a process.
I totally agree. I was speaking those words, giving a talk yesterday, and yes, we need to acknowledge the shadow, but not become eclipsed by it. And, you know, our role is to become balanced. So when we are balanced, our harmonic resonance is our true beauty. Yeah. So I kind of joke that the new sexy is us embodying that matrix of the yantra in our energy field, which is the most potent symbol in Tantra, and it denotes the perfect harmonic balance of all polarities, light and dark, feminine, masculine, spirit and matter. And so, you know, yes, our thoughts are so potent and so powerful. And as beings of light, we have the gift to create. That is our superpower. So every day I start with my visualizations of what it is that I'm creating. And, you know, I've been doing talks around the world, trying to encourage people to respond to, you know, the rollout of Agenda 30 by the globalists as alchemists rather than activists. Because if we respond as activists, we create more polarity. Yeah, us and them, right and wrong, good and bad. And instead, you know, I don't know if you remember the children's film of the Dark Crystal, but at the end, the Skeksis, who are like the evil overlords, and the mystics merge and become one. And that is what we're asked to do, to bring together, integrate our light and shadow in Sushumna, the central pillar, and be accountable for all of our wings and our tail, you know, and love all aspects of ourselves from the primal to the galactic. And then we can move forwards. But we can't go through the eye and the needle into the higher dimensional realms, which is where we're preparing to go, you know, with our imminent shift into the photon belt and the pole shift. You know, all of this is a preparation. This is the labor for the birth.
Yes, and I guess it's always darkest before dawn in a sense. But yeah, like you're saying, it's just focusing on, I guess, being more in that love state and in the heart, because the heart doesn't hold the duality of the mind, does it? The heart is the infinite. It is the birthplace of all that we want to create, and it's everything and nothing all at once. So that's where we all need to drop into, away from the mind. The mind's there to serve, but just keeping it, you know, from the heart. So
Absolutely. Well said.
Oh, thanks. So you've had an incredible life and journey, and I'm always in awe of how you are able to just follow your intuitive guidance. Just like, I mean, a lot of people are able to do it, but it feels like it's on another level with you, where you'll just drop everything and go to another country and, you know, create something. And I find it absolutely, I'm in awe of your choices and your just trust of, you're just in such a state of trust. How, you know, can you share anything about your process, or how you've come to being so in alignment with your intuitive self and your inner realm?
Good question. I think the fact that I did readings for many, many years, you know, it's like going to the gym. You use a muscle, it gets stronger. So the way that I put food on the table as a sole parent was, you know, doing tarot readings, archetypal readings. And I would always set up the space to ask to be a vessel for how I could best serve that person. So as soon as anybody makes that intention, it's not about you. And so the divine moves through you. So I suppose I was practicing being receptive and attuning to my intuition, because I genuinely wanted to not steer the person in the wrong direction. I really wanted to, you know, because people come for a reading when they're in crisis. So having done that for, you know, best part of 27 years, now it feels, as I'm, you know, navigating menopause, that I'm being asked to take such a huge leap of faith, because people are watching me. They're watching to see if I'm going to embody my teachings. You know, the difference between a preacher and an avatar is someone who embodies what they're asking others to do. So it's literally a trial by fire. I mean, you know, I feel like I'm going to combust some days because I've, you know, had such intense hot flushes, but it feels like that is part of the process, you know, that inner fire of Kundalini is just purifying me, you know. So, and it's not that I'm not afraid, you know. I remember saying one day to one of my girlfriends back home, it felt like I was on a razor edge every day, and it could either be the best or the worst decision of my life, and I wouldn't know until this, you know, show was complete. But there is also a part of me that is actually more afraid of not following a calling than of following it, because my feeling is that, you know, why are we here? We're here to grow, we're here to heal, we're here to be of service. And if we're not utilizing our time here and utilizing all of the gifts that we've honed over many incarnations to show up and do that to the best of our ability, then we are not being truly grateful for the gift of life. And that we're, you know, if we're not doing what it is we came here to do, we're at risk of getting hit by a bus or manifesting cancer. And that's not to say people that are manifesting cancer are, you know, making mistakes or getting it wrong. It's just right or wrong. That's a belief that I am walking with. So when my heart, and I think also because my calling seemed to come in such intense ways, you know, through visions, through full-bodied visceral experiences, you know, like this latest calling to create this show in Edinburgh. First it came through as a vision of me naked on a stage with a pair of butterfly wings, and I, of course, did the refusal of the call. It's like, no, thank you, you know, I've had muscles atrophy on my thighs, you know, no one needs to see that, thank you. And then the next day it was an eclipse, and at dawn, and I feel this holographic rainbow serpent wake me up and moving through my body, and I'm taken into states of absolute orgasmic ecstasy, and then visions and words start coming. And, you know, through experience it's not that I'm just like, oh, it'd be good to do that. It's not something that's coming from the rational mind. It's coming from something which is bigger than me. And so there's a part of me that feels humbled by that, I suppose. It's like, who am I not to do what's being asked of me? And one of my favorite films is what's his, not Bruce Almighty, but the sequel. Is it not Evan Almighty? And he gets told to build an ark. And I love that film because you risk looking like you're mad, like you're a fool. Like, for me to go from being a respected teacher and an author to, hey, I'm going to make an album and I'm going to do a show. I mean, it just sounds so ridiculous. It sounds like a midlife crisis. But the beauty in it is that not just is it serving the greater good, because it's taking the teachers to an audience that normally wouldn't read a book, wouldn't go to a retreat, but and my intention is to sell this, hopefully to Netflix, to go where the people are and to be able to initiate people through entertainment. Talk about spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, make it entertaining, So
Absolutely.
really,
Yeah.
in midlife, we should be using all of who we are to create a legacy, to create a better world than the one we came into. And so I've got these latent gifts, stand-up comedy, singing, just performing, really, that I hadn't used for the last 27 years while I served as a mystic. So now that I get this opportunity to bring the two together, it's using all of me. So it's actually fulfilling for my soul because it draws upon the multifacets of who I am. So yeah, it's lit me up. I'm feeling, excited and alive and youthful, exhausted because it's such a mammoth project. But also it's stretching me. I'm growing, and so that's quite stimulating and exhilarating.
And I love that how you're unifying all your gifts, and it's just another level of unification and expressing that. Yeah, it's just a beautiful thing to be able to offer, and I'm sure that will have a phenomenal wave of impact with you offering these teachings as amazingly as you do in this way. I find it really exciting, and what a brilliant thing to just wake up one day, or have this guidance coming through, and just do it. Because I mean, it's probably the saddest thing in the world, isn't it, when people don't follow their guidance later in life and realize, oh, if I had have just done what I was here to do. I mean, they'll have another chance. They may have another lifetime after that, but it's just, it feels good to really follow through and honor that guidance and unfold, more and more, and just blossom through your life.
Yeah, I was born during the moon phase that is first quarter moon, so the week before the full moon. And that phase, we teach in women's mysteries, is the maiden. And the maiden wants to fulfill and explore her potential. So, I'm an embodiment of that. If I was born at full moon, then my primary focus would have been relationship, So, and that isn't to say that my heart doesn't yearn to be fully met in relationship, but it's like first I needed to really explore my potential first. And growing up in a patriarchy, there's a fear of, oh, if I'm in a relationship, maybe I won't get to do that, So, part of understanding the cycles is it acts as a map to working out our purpose and why we're here and why we're making the choices that we have.
Beautiful. Yantra, I looked it up and it means instrument. Is that correct? Like it's a Sanskrit word. So you'll be using your instrument, operating as an instrument of the divine to offer these teachings. Will it be recorded as well, or people who go to Edinburgh and see the show, how is it being delivered?
Yeah, it is the instrument, you know. So the more that we learn how to play our instrument, you know, the better we are at lovemaking. You know, it's like we've all got this reed pipe, which is the 7 energy centers or the colors of the rainbow, the 7 tones, the 7 states of awareness. And so when we learn to open those, it's like the breath of heaven can flow through like an empty reed pipe, and we become a voice for the divine, an oracle. So I'm sharing my truth, what I've learnt, and hoping that will inspire others to fulfill their heroine's journey, which is the journey of the feminine part of us, not just women, but everybody. So, yeah, the show is, first of all, we're doing a preview here in Bali where I'm here to rehearse the show. So if anyone is in the vicinity of Bali on the 22nd of July, they can come and see the preview. And then the show will open. The global premiere is over at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival on August the 2nd. And there's 9 performances. It's the late show at the Space UK venue. And we're inviting the audience, like in the tradition of Rocky Horror, to come dressed for a butterfly ball. And it's interactive, it's sing-along, so there's mantras in all the songs. So the idea is we're raising the vibe and people walk out feeling just lit. But it also is, the show is half performance and it's half animation. So in my head, I've seen all of these tantric, shamanic visions, which I've had animators recreate. So it's taking the audience on a psychedelic journey of initiation into meeting the 7 faces of Venus to transform our 7 universal fears into love. So I am getting it filmed, and I hope to then be able to sell it to a streaming platform such as Netflix. I'm also going to be pitching it to tour promoters to hopefully take it to, theatres around the world. Who knows, maybe a cinema release. I don't know what format, as the Arabic people say, inshallah, God willing, we will see how this instrument, this vehicle is going to be delivered to the masses. But I'm very clear that is, I've created something that is able to be adapted to the screen very easily. So that's my intention.
Sounds incredible. I hope it comes to Melbourne. I would love
Me too.
I'd love to see you performing it. It sounds so exciting and incredible, and just such an awesome thing that you're doing, and just getting it out there. Such brilliant work. I just wanted to touch again on the men. Isn't it like the children and the women awakening first and the men as last to awaken, maybe because of the patriarchal energies? There are a lot more women whose hearts are open and who are coming more into that balanced state of being in harmony. I feel like the men get a bit of a hard time, and they really need more support and to be able to move to that next stage and be in a more balanced state and rise more into their heart. Is there anything that you would offer?
Yeah, I agree with you. If we think about
in that process,
we take our minds back to when we were 12 and the girls matured early and we towered over the boys, right? So women do tend to mature emotionally and psychologically before men. But it's not that men are less or, men are often more developed rationally and materially. So we are complementary, you know? So women can assist men to mature, just as men can assist women to be more empowered with things in the world, whether it's doing our taxes or legal stuff or, running a business or things like that. So we have these skill sets that are complementary. I have a free video series for men called Awakening the Sacred Masculine, which explains why men, don't, if we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is the last thing most men will spend their money on, But ironically, nowadays, that is the thing that's most attractive to a woman. I recently met a man who is a multi-millionaire, and he was very keen to be my partner, but he hadn't begun his journey of personal growth and healing. And I knew I would end up mothering him, having to process his thoughts and feelings, holding space for him. And that's draining. Yeah, it's appropriate we do that with our children, but not with our partners. And I believe this is one of the reasons that breast cancer is so prolific in women, that they are having to nurture not just their children, but their partners as a parent would. And similarly, a lot of men, have had to carry women financially and rationally and had to be their fathers. This is the codependent model that we're outgrowing. So my last book, The Grail, is written specifically for men. And it's helpful for women to read as well. There's a lot in it. It unpacks both the father wound and the mother wound, the father and the mother complex. It speaks to the patterns that happen in relationship and why it's time for the beloveds to come together and the role that we play in healing the world. But it is written specifically to heal the collective male psyche and to empower the male psyche by initiating men into what essentially they would have got when they turned 21, the key to the mysteries, which patriarchy stole from men, so that men were kind of having to muddle through, not knowing who they were, and with a fear that they'd be found out. This is why we see distant fathers and distant partners, because there's a lot of pretense. They're trying to play a role, but inside they feel disempowered. So, to anyone watching this interview, please consider gifting it to the men that you love. It's also on audiobook, because I know a lot of men suffer from dyslexia. But I do recommend having a physical copy or a Kindle copy of it if you're listening to it, because there's so many images that I, refer to, like when we were children and we had, the books where Tinkerbell would say it's time to turn the page, and we'd listen to the little golden book record as we followed along on the book. That's the ideal way to journey the book. But I have a website, thegrail.com, which is THE-GRAIL.com. And if you go there, there's the free video series for men and some info about the book and links.
Incredible. Well, I've really enjoyed chatting with you today, Tanishka. Is there anything else that you'd like to offer or share? I'll leave all of your links under the video.
Yeah. One other thought. So I also have self-study programs. One is for men, and it's to meet and empower and understand the 7 faces of the masculine that map the masculine half of our psyche, and the equivalent one is the Inner Goddess program for women to map and meet and empower the 7 faces of your feminine psyche. So, yeah, those are available at themoonwoman.com. And then, yeah, that's... And I've got books and meditations as well. Like, there's lots of resources on that website. But, yeah, that should give people a starting point.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You've just have so much wisdom, and I'm so grateful that you're in the world, helping support people through these transient times. So, thank you so much for coming on and joining me, and
Thank you.
much gratitude and lots of love.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you just for having such an aligned heart. When I speak to someone that really gets what I'm about, it's inspiring. So thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you feel called to like and share the show, if you want to leave me a review, I'd be most honoured and grateful. It really helps getting the show out there to the right people. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.